guys, and welcome back to another solved true crime case today. If you're new around here, I do predominantly Australian true crime videos weekly-ish. I do work full-time, so it's like, ooh. I do predominantly Australian because I'm Australian and that is where my passion lies. And today we're talking about a very local case to me, and it's the tragic case of Jessie Cate. And just before we get started, I'm in a new location. I'm pretty sure it's quite echoey, especially on camera. Let me know so I can try to fix it. So I'm using natural lighting for the first time in like my life. I usually use like 5 different studio lights because I'm in this really like big bright apartment, so I thought I'm gonna give it a go. So if the lighting changes, bear with me over the next few videos. Enough rambling, let's get into today's case. So in December of 2011, Jessie Paula Cate was a 15-year-old schoolgirl. She was popular, she was happy, and described as very loving and caring by her mother. She dreamed of being a kindergarten school teacher one day, and like many girls her age, she had a boyfriend who she loved and adored. His name was Harley Murphy and he was 17 years old, and at this time they had been together for only 2 months, but it was described that Jess was really the happiest that she had ever been. They were rarely seen apart, they were always together, but at the same time Jessie was always spending time with friends and family. She had a very good balance. She was very family and very friend orientated. Just overall had love for everyone in her life. She also had a job at her local Woolworths supermarket. We call it Woolies here in Australia, so you'll probably just hear me call the supermarket Woolies for the video. She'd only been working there about 6 weeks at this time, and it was just like a casual job that she did after school. Even though she'd been at this job for such a short period of time, her employers had really high praise for her, describing her as very bright and a promising employee. Jessie lived in Dawesville, I think it's pronounced, which is a suburb of Mandurah in Western Australia, which is very close to where I live here in Perth. So on December the 12th, 2011, which was a Monday, Jessie had a shift at her casual job at Woolies. The shift started at 3:55 p.m. and went till 6:30 p.m. She did have school that day, but she was pretty much going from school to her job. But it was an unusually stormy, rainy summer's day in Australia, and remembering of course December is summer in Australia, so it was quite unusual weather. So her mum, Judy Cate, offered to give her a lift. Before Jessie got out the car, she asked her daughter, "So are you alright to catch the bus home?" "Yes mum, I love you," Jessie replied. "I love you too babe," Judy told her daughter before driving away. So when Jessie's shift came to an end at 6:30, she was offered a lift from a family friend named Kyle Rohan Garth, who was 19 years old, and she accepted the lift because the weather was horrible. Now she knew Kyle because he dated her older sister, so he was considered like a family friend. Her mum really liked him, all that good stuff. And Kyle also happened to work at the same Woolies supermarket that Jessie did, and he had been there that night. He didn't have a shift, but it wasn't really stated anywhere why he was there. Maybe he was doing some food shopping, who knows? But he was at Woolies that night and he had a conversation with Jess. We don't really know what was in that conversation, but it can be assumed he offered her a lift because of the weather. When her shift ended, Jessie walked outside where it was still raining to wait for Kyle to pick her up, and she checked her phone. She had a message from her boyfriend Harley, who knew she finished her shift at 6:30 that evening, and it said simply, "I love you," to which Jessie replied, "I love you too," and Harley sent back a smiley face. And these texts were around 6:35 p.m. and Kyle arrived at around 6:40 p.m. to pick Jessie up from her shift. He picked her up in his red Nissan Bluebird P-plated car before the pair drove off, and that was that. So later that same evening at the Cates family home, her mother noticed her very unusual and unexplained absence. Jessie should have come straight home from her shift, but when she didn't, her mother acted really quickly. Judy reported her daughter missing to police at about 8:30 or just before, I believe, because that's when the last late bus was from her supermarket job. And if she wasn't on that late bus, then where was she? Upon hearing the news that Jessie had gone missing, Kyle Garth immediately rang Jessie Cate to tell her that he had seen Jessie earlier that evening. He'd actually given her a lift, but she'd asked to be dropped off at a local park, and he hadn't seen her since then. Judy was somewhat suspicious of this piece of information because she knew her daughter would inform her of a change of plans. She had her phone with her. There was no reason she wouldn't, and she just wasn't known for not telling her mum when a change of plans happened. And not to mention, why would she want to be dropped off at a park in these weather conditions? She'd rather be home. She didn't like being in wet weather conditions, and she hated getting her hair wet, which can relate. But you know, Judy did know and like Kyle. He had dated her older daughter, so why should she be suspicious of what he'd said? When Harley, Jessie's boyfriend, heard that his girlfriend went missing, he and a friend, Rob Webb, went searching pretty much through the night on foot for her because neither of them had their license. But unfortunately, they had no luck in finding Jessie. Jessie Cate's disappearance was immediately taken seriously by police because it was so incredibly out of her character, and an investigation really took off the next morning straight away. Jessie really wasn't one to cut off contact with friends or loved ones. As I said, she was incredibly family and friends orientated. So for her to, by choice, cut off contact with her boyfriend, her mum, her sisters, her friends, just something had happened. So the next day, Tuesday, December the 13th, at 7:45 p.m. that evening, Kyle Garth was arrested by the Major Crime Squad detectives. So Kyle seemed quite oblivious and dumbfounded by his arrest at the time, stating that he didn't even consider what was happening at the time when he was arrested. In his initial police interviews, Kyle said he had nothing to do with Jessie's disappearance. He was not a violent person and he had done nothing wrong. However, it was not long before Kyle Garth cracked under police pressure. He eventually drew for police a mud map that would lead them to the body of Jessie Cate. And only 36 hours after Jessie Cate had gone missing, detectives recovered her body from a shallow grave. Kyle told police, "I choked her with my hands. I don't know what came over me. Jess and I never had a problem. We got into an argument. What I did was my choice." After only 8 hours of questioning, Kyle Garth was charged with the murder of 15-year-old schoolgirl Jessie Cate. When asked by police what was going through his head, Kyle's head, when he decided to kill Jessie, he responded, "That's what disturbed me the most." Then when police asked Kyle what he hoped to achieve by strangling Jessie, he said, "Kill her." And I did. Kyle also stated during these interviews, "What I done wasn't fair. I can't explain it. I haven't got words for it." It wasn't long before friends and family were informed of the fate of the popular and much loved Jessie Cate. And the most shocking news of all, that she had been murdered by a family friend and by a boy, a 19-year-old boy. And this was really at the time news that shocked all of, not only where she lived in Mandurah, but all of Perth or WA. I'm not really aware of if this did make like national headlines in Australia. I'm really not sure, but this was a massive news story here and one that really affected the community. I can remember people just getting so angry on Facebook and talking about this, and just it was one of the first cases I remember that really affected me. I remember hearing about it and just crying about it, and it's one of those cases because I think it's just the fact that this was someone, a family friend, she trusted, her mum trusted, she was just getting a lift home from her, you know, casual after school job. And anyway, so Jessie's boyfriend posted on Facebook Rest in peace, baby. You will always be in my heart. And Harley was described by... I'm sorry, I'm getting really emotional. Harley was described by friends as going berserk at the news of his girlfriend Jessie's death. So let's jump back in time for a minute and talk about what happened on the day Jessie was killed, or at least his version of events. So in the car, Kyle and Jessie got into an argument, apparently about the relationship that Kyle had with Jessie's younger sibling after he had broken up with Jessie's older sibling. And Jessie got very emotional about this conversation, but Kyle pretty much had the opposite reaction to the conversation and became infuriated. And he pulled his car over in a blind fit of rage. He reached over and put one hand behind Jessie's neck and one in front in an attempt to choke Jessie. Jessie tried to fight back this very unexpected attack, leaving scratch marks on his face. And it's at this point that Jessie did become unconscious. And also at this point, it had been less than 2 minutes since Kyle had picked Jessie up from her job at Woolies. Kyle began to drive again, but was stopped in his tracks when he heard murmuring and mumbling sounds coming from Jessie, and it appeared that Jessie was regaining consciousness, which completely freaked Kyle out. These sounds prompted Kyle to pull over and apply pressure to Jessie's neck again in another attempt to choke her, and he said he did this out of fear. Kyle continued to drive 10 kilometers south of Mandurah to Tim Thickett's Boulevard, a popular fishing and four-wheel driving spot where he pulled Jessie's lifeless body out from his car and laid her down next to a hollowed out log and just covered her in some branches. It's actually thought that Jessie may have still been alive at this point in the evening. And also at this point, he actually left the body there and drove back to his home in Pinjarra, which is a town in Western Australia, to collect a shovel and then return to Jessie's body. Upon returning to her lifeless body, he dug a very shallow grave, which he put her in and covered her, barely covering her with dirt and sticks. And Kyle marked the location of the body, or put some branches apparently like on the roadside, so he could come back to the location of her grave at a later point if he needed to. Finally, he disposed of Jessie Cate's bag and the shovel in Dawesville somewhere, which was the suburb in which Jessie lived in. And it also should be noted at this point that Kyle Garth had no previous criminal record and had never been in trouble with the law. Kyle also visited his girlfriend that evening, I believe before he buried Jessie's body, and his girlfriend actually pointed out the scratch markings on his face, to which Kyle said he just got some injuries at work and basically brushed off the topic. After this, Kyle went back home to his place in Pinjarra and played video games with his male housemate. And this housemate said that Kyle just seemed like his normal self that evening. And they just pretty much continued to play video games for hours into the early hours of the morning as if nothing had ever happened. So on the 23rd of December, 2 days before Christmas, Jessie Cate's body was laid to rest. Those that attended her funeral were encouraged to wear purple, which was Jessie's favorite color, and even her coffin was actually colored a beautiful light purple color. I'm going to put some pictures on screen of the funeral. They also had a big purple bouquet of flowers that were placed in the water. I believe it was at the Mandurah foreshore that this took place. And there's photos in here of Harley, her boyfriend, which are so heartbreaking. I can so clearly remember the images of her funeral. It was something I think a lot of people in Perth would still remember seeing over and over again on the news back in 2011. But moving on, so in May of 2012, Kyle Garth pleaded guilty to the murder of Jessie Cate. And this was much to the relief of the friends and family of Jessie Cate, because this really spared them the torment of going through a harrowing trial. Jessie's friends and family sat in the public gallery to hear Kyle Garth admit his guilt to killing Jessie out loud. And it's at this point when he admitted his guilt that many of the friends and family just started shedding tears. And unfortunately, Harley could not bring himself to be there to face his girlfriend's killer. I do not blame him one bit. The prosecutor, Carmel Barbagallo, described the murder as being done with callousness and coldness. Defense lawyer Brian Mahon reminded Justice Lindy Jenkins, Kyle Garth had no previous criminal record and was truly remorseful for what he had done. He stated that there was never an indication he was prone to getting in trouble. Kyle Garth recognizes he has taken the life of a young girl. He is fully aware he has shattered many lives. So sentencing date for Kyle Garth was on September 5th, 2012, which was almost 1 year since Jessie Cate's murder. Judy Cate, as well as many of Jessie Cate's friends and family, gathered in the public gallery to hear the results of the trial. Kyle Garth was found guilty of the murder of Jessie Cate and sentenced to life in jail, with a minimum term of 18 years starting from the previous December. Justice Jenkins described the murder as ferocious. She stated that Jessie was a vulnerable 15-year-old. You abused the trust she placed in you in a gross and awful way. You had given her every reason to believe that you were a trustworthy person whom she could rely upon to take her safely from her work to her home. What is clear is that the attack was unprovoked, that when you had the opportunity to desist and seek help for her, you thought only of yourself. You attacked her again with the intention of killing her. And of course, this was Justice Jenkins speaking to Kyle directly. Outside of the courtroom, Jessie's uncle Rick Trude stated he was relieved this part of the journey was over. This is a journey that is going to last Judy and the rest of our family a lifetime. However, we feel that justice has been done today. To be honest, the jail term, was a little bit more than what we had hoped. Nothing is going to bring Jessie back. Her memory will outlive Kyle's name forever and a day. She will never ever be forgotten. I feel for him, Kyle. He is a young man. We hope he comes out of this a better person. So her uncle Rick Trude was quite, I guess, forgiving, or had come to terms with it in a way. I don't think that's the right term for it, but he definitely was more forgiving than Judy Cate, Jessie's mum, which is completely understandable. So what she actually said was, Jessie trusted him. I liked him. This just came out of the blue and I was shocked. And in another tragic turn of events, in June of 2012, just days after Kyle Garth had pleaded guilty, Jessie's father, Paul Cate, passed away in a fatal assault. Judy and Paul Cate had actually separated about 3.5 years previous and were married for 15 years. So regardless of the separation, it was still a tragic event. And although Jessie and her father weren't actually close at the time of her death, he'd actually not really spoken or seen his girls for 8 months before Jessie's death. It's still her father. It's still Judy's, ex-husband of 15 years. And it's just another tragic event that happened to this family at a terrible time for them already. Kyle Garth has, to this day, never apologized to Jessie Cate's friends or family for what he did to Jessie, nor has he explained or clarified why he really killed Jessie. There's definitely been speculation, but there's never been any real clarification from Kyle. Also, at no point has Kyle really shown any remorse for what he did to Jessie. And Jessie Cate really feels that an apology would honestly just be worthless at this point. Jessie stated, "I can't change the past. I can only choose how to make the future better for myself. I choose to be happy. I don't want to have a hardened heart. I want to give to others like Jessie did." And that does sum up today's case. A case that really touched so many in Perth and across Western Australia, and a case that angered so many people, myself included. I hope I've managed to do Jessie Cate justice and bring you her story in the most respectful way possible, and in a way so her memory is never forgotten. So that is all for today's video. Don't forget to comment and subscribe down below. Let me know your thoughts on today's case. Stay vigilant, stay safe, and I will see you soon.